All right, so hi everyone. This is Shreya. She's a designer at Uber currently on the Uber for Business Enterprise team. Prior to working on the Uber for Business, she was on the Uber's mobility concepts team, a small group of designers, engineers, and thinkers focused on building the next generation of mobility services and products within Uber's rider organization. Before that, Shreya graduated from Duke in 2019 with a major in mechanical engineering and visual arts. Is there anything else you want to add, Shreya? Um,
No, that was great. Thanks for that intro.
Yep, and I can hand
Um,
it over to you now.
yep, sounds good. I will go ahead and start sharing my screen. Give me one second. Here we go. All right. I think, is this full screen for you? I can never tell.
We can see your tabs, but I think
That's fine.
it's fine.
All right, whatever. We'll make it work. Okay, cool. So as um, was mentioned, I graduated from Duke in 2019 with majors in mechanical engineering and visual arts. I've been at Uber for almost 2 years now, and kind of fell into the design field very accidentally, from just like learning and coming across other people who are in the industry. But this is where I am now, and what I wanted to do today was kind of just lay some groundwork for kind of why design is important and kind of look at it through a couple of different lenses. Um, Sharing some examples and kind of just giving you a little bit of food for thought to think about how you include design in your projects and your work going forward. This is kind of really meant to be something that you can take principles from and extrapolate it to, any part of your any project that you're working on, or kind of any part of your life, and it's not solely meant for digital products specifically, but kind of just more principles around why design is an important foundation part of the process. So with that, I think a lot of times we hear that people think of design as, something that is just about making things pretty. It's kind of confounded with graphic design, and everything's kind of lumped into one. And that's really something that I really strive to make people see the difference in. And I think that is where all of this starts, is kind of understanding that design is not just about making things pretty. It starts way before that. And with that being said, product design is really about problem solving. So we are really concerned with the experience of products, and I've left the definition of product extremely broad. It doesn't really only have to be something digital. It can also be something physical, anything that you see, in the space around you. And even though visuals are kind of the most visible facet of a product that a designer is concerned with, and something that people see immediately, the reach extends into kind of any aspect of the product that directly affects the user. So that goes to the experience, or even just the problem that you're solving, starting with, like, is that problem relevant to our society today? Is it the right problem to solve? Or is there something that's like deeper that actually needs to be addressed? And this is kind of more of a surface level question. With that being said, I think I'm not saying that designers are not artists and that it can't be an artful profession or an artful kind of area. In my opinion, I think good design is something that wins hearts and minds and markets, and it's something that combines beauty and utility. And so what I really push people to think about is that functional design is something that enables people, and kind of giving beauty to something is something that signals respect and worth of a product. And so Tesla is really an example that they've done a really great job of emphasizing both form and function, which is kind of why I use it as like my cornerstone example of how design can kind of really set the tone of a product. They took a niche market and then turned it into a coveted world-class experience with just great design. And they really understood that by designing something that that provided this experience, you were empowering others to, drive cars that made the environment a cleaner place. So it was not the first product that addressed pollution or the first electric car that entered the market. But what they did do was they put artistry with utility, and they made them both work for social good, which is something that we can all learn from, kind of combining both the design and kind of the utility part of what you're trying to solve, and putting them together. And so they basically packaged eco-consciousness as a luxury good through this like beautiful design that you see in all of their cars. So I really ask people to think about that as kind of being the North Star vision of how design and utility kind of intersect, and how you kind of combine form and function together. So with that being said, the flip side to that is the worst part of design is that it can actually, harm people. And so to drive home that point, this is an example of why design is really important, not only, in the luxury goods space or the kind of more just user-facing products. This is a medical software that kind of violates a lot of rules of usability. The information density is really high, and it's impossible to kind of find critical information. So what happened here was that nurses actually here missed an alert that ended up actually resulting in a fatal consequence, where someone died because they couldn't find the right information. So, a simple matter of adjusting visual hierarchy or being able to actually pull out the important information can be the difference between life and death. So this is obviously an extreme example, but it's also an example of why good design matters in almost every kind of interface or every product that you're creating. And it's why designers are so badly needed, not only in current, like fad markets, but also in healthcare, public service, and other fields that are super critical to our well-being. And so if you guys are interested in, more cases like this, Jonathan Sharia actually has a book called Tragic Design, and this is kind of where I got this from. And there's more examples in here of plane crashes, Ebola patients being sent home accidentally, and cancer patients receiving almost 20 times the amount of radiation dosage that they should have, all of which have led to fatal consequences. So it just gives you food for thought that design is needed not only in the current tech space, but in every part of our society and every function that kind of exists. On the flip side, I think at its best, design can really empower people. So the kind of company or the product that I use as an example is Airbnb, because if you really think about it, they managed to get over 600,000 people to open their homes to complete strangers, which was not the mental model before Airbnb existed, and people didn't want to do that. So they somehow were able to convince strangers to let other people into their homes and stay there. And the way that they did that was through building these authentic and meaningful relationships with a thoughtfully designed platform. So that was only achieved by designing for trust in their community. And the way that they did this was that they recognized that there was a connection beyond just the transactional kind of power of the sharing economy. And so to deepen the connection, the company they host an Airbnb Open every year, where they invite hosts to come and engage with people that work at the company, and learn from these hosts about what's working and what's not working. And by creating a sense of trust and actually acting on the feedback that they get from their hosts, these hosts have continued to support the platform and open their homes up. So that level of engagement and that level of trust, it allows hosts to kind of build that personal connection and continue using a platform like Airbnb. So on the flip side, it's something that can really do good for the world. And at its best, design can really empower people. So I think there's two sides to it, and I would encourage you to kind of look at the products you use and look at how they've used design to kind of want you to stay on the product, or they've used design to kind of get you to become a trusted user or a repeating user of a certain product. Cool. So with that being said, I think there's a lot of designing with empathy is kind of a buzzword that has been around in the design industry for a long time. But I wanted to kind of drill a little deeper into that and kind of actually talk about what designing with empathy really means, or what the word empathy actually really means. So besides understanding who you're designing for, I think there's more to just that component. Recognizing that people have different cultures and needs will help you understand whatever situation you're creating a product for. And even if you don't live their lives, you can watch and listen and learn from people, and that kind of builds your connection with your users and makes you kind of feel like you understand their scenario, so you can create a product that is actually better tailored for them than kind of assumptions that you are making without data or any kind of information to back it up. So with empathy, this is just an interesting graph of since 2004, according to Google Trends. This is kind of like the trend of the use of the word empathy. And so it's great to see that it's resonating with so many people, but for designers, the question is, how do we turn this kind of talk into action and actually, put something out there that resonates with people? So this is a great quote, I think, that actually summarizes it pretty well. People ignore design that ignores people. So empathy in simple terms is kind of a deep understanding of the problems and realities of the people that you're designing for. And when we talk about human-centered design, we're really talking about understanding and speaking for the people who will ultimately use the products we design, since they don't have a voice when the product is being created. And as designers, it's our responsibility to kind of be a champion for the users and constantly think about what they want and need and feel. And looking at the experiences we're designing from a user's perspective, I think it's at a lot of times it's very easy to get caught up in the idea that if it's a product that you use frequently, you kind of confound what you want with what your end user wants. And it's important to keep reminding yourself that you are not your end user, and the people who you're designing for are not, they won't face the same challenges as you do. So not letting the voice of the user get drowned out by conflicting interests or unnecessary features is kind of what I think the core of designing with empathy is. And if we fail to do that, then we risk designing a product that is unwanted by the people that it was intended for, which then causes them to ignore it. And that is definitely not what we'd like to see as creators. And so an example of this, I think, is Oscar Health. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Oscar Health, but they basically took health insurance and kind of turned it into a very simple, user-friendly interface and product for people to understand, since the insurance space is an incredibly complicated space and has a lot of fine print that a lot of us don't understand or don't really even know where to begin with it. So Oscar Health was founded in 2012 and it was a direct response to kind of like the lack of transparency in the insurance industry. And it had a mission to kind of make health insurance people friendly. So what they did was they reimagined the entire user experience, from making it incredibly easy to sign up to using straightforward language on the post-doctor bills. So you can see their interface is incredibly simple, and that's what they were aiming for. And this was done with a lot of research and a lot of data backing their designs. And so I would say that another core tenet of empathy is kind of, it's the process of getting closer to your users to kind of uncover unmet or unidentified needs, as well as unimagined potential solutions. And that's what they did. They talked to a lot of people to understand what were the actual struggles that they were facing within the insurance space, or what people were actually having trouble with, and how they could kind of pull out that information and make it incredibly simple to understand. And so by putting what's right for their users at the core of everything that they do, they built a business based on empathy, and it's one that's poised to disrupt a $1.8 trillion insurance industry. And that kind of leads me to why design is important within the business context, and how design actually can disrupt, using good design can disrupt a space. When you see something that is well designed, users are confident in the product reliability and the performance expectations that they have. Seeing good design kind of immediately establishes a level of trust with people and with users, and appearance kind of becomes identified with the underlying functional features with a particular level of product quality. So you are already kind of jumping that gap of, if it is a new product, they already trust you because they see that it is designed well and something that they can resonate with. And to kind of drive home this point, currently America's top 15 design conscious companies outperform their peer group by 228% on a market asset value basis, which in a nutshell just means that they are design focused companies are really providing the value to the consumers that other companies are currently unable to meet. And the way they do this is because design kind of sets a direction for where the North Star is going, and it kind of sets the guide for the rest of the company for what everyone is working towards. So having focused designs demonstrating how different you are from existing offerings becomes a beacon, and it's one that everyone knows what they're striving to. And it helps you quickly determine what's resonating with your users or your investors and what isn't. So by making design central to kind of its disruptive strategy, you can differentiate yourself as a consumer-focused product. That being said, I think it's important to remember that in a nutshell, design is a process that balances conflicting sets of constraints. And what I really mean by that is it falls at the core of the user, the tech constraints, and the business constraints. So you're kind of really balancing what's viable, what's possible, and what's desirable within the process. And as a designer, it is your responsibility and your task to understand how you can balance the three needs and how you can kind of make those needs meet to build the best possible product that meets all of the three kind of constraints that exist. And a framework for this that I've kind of used in the past, and something that I would encourage people to use going forward, is answering three key questions, or starting with these three key questions that you can use as a guiding force for your product. So number one, what are you trying to solve? Understanding, what the problem is. And then once you understand that, how do you know it's a real problem, and what kind of information, data, or anecdotes have led you to believe this? Whenever you create something, you always need, your problem to be backed up by some kind of data or some kind of information that provides kind of a basis for your hypothesis that it's a problem. And then the third is, why solve this problem over others, and especially in a company or when you're starting a company, you have very limited resources and time. And so there is always an opportunity cost for applying your resources to this specific problem over another. And that is kind of where understanding the constraints comes in, and understanding whether this is the problem you should be solving over others after balancing those three constraints. So I would say starting with the high level problem is important. Starting on the smaller details of what the final screens are going to look like or what the color is going to be isn't worth your time. If the big picture is messy, then the small details won't matter that much anyway, and resources shouldn't be spent focusing on those small details. And in the design spectrum, I highly believe that high fidelity is only about the last 10% of the process. The 90% is understanding the problem, getting user research, and the entire iterative cycle before you get to your high fidelity designs. And as creators and as users of products in the world, we tend not to think beyond our own experiences. We believe that we can extend what we know to the rest of the world. And this makes us prone to solving problems that apply only to ourselves. And so it's again important to remind yourself that, when you design only for yourself, it's not the design that you're after, because most times you are not your user. And kind of a way to combat this, or an exercise to kind of build that muscle, is just thinking about the people that are in your surroundings, people that you interact with every day. Just observe them and kind of come up with stories about them. Ask yourself, oh, like, what is their story? What's their background? What problems might they face in their life? And kind of creating these user stories around people that you don't know or haven't met before will build that muscle of you thinking about other people, and kind of putting yourself in the shoes of different users. And so I think I always like to end, especially when I'm talking at Duke, I like to end with things that helped me at Duke to get into the design field. So so from classes, I would say I took experimental interface design, which is an incredible class, kind of focused more on building products and researching interfaces that exist currently. And the final project was a great way to kind of put all your skills together. I took physical computing, which was kind of more of like an internet IoT based class. So hardware and software kind of come together, but also a class where you could like create your own product and go through the entire cycle of understanding like what the problem was, defining if it was a real problem, and kind of figuring out who you were solving for. And then I took virtual reality research, which was more to do with reading research papers, but also a great way to see how tech can be applied to kind of spaces that extend beyond just the products that we know today. And then I would say my biggest piece of advice other than that would be reach out to alumni and talk to other people. There's so many alumni from Duke that are, in Silicon Valley working in tech, started their own company. The list goes on. So if you are, if tech is a space that you want to get into, they are always great people to talk to. And this goes even extends beyond Duke. If you're not a Duke student, from whatever school you're from, alumni are usually always willing to help. So definitely would say that. And then I think outside of Duke, learning outside, these are kind of places that I've gone to for inspiration. And some of the biggest places I've learned from are Medium. I've read a lot of design blogs from there. The Year of the Looking Glass by Julie Zhou is a great article, or a set of articles that basically talks about how you set a North Star for a design, and how you drive your team towards that vision and kind of keep focus on building that North Star. And and so I would encourage people to read it, even if you're looking to go into product or just any kind of field that's related to tech, on how you can kind of keep people anchored to the vision of what you're trying to achieve. And then for podcasts, I really love Design Matters. It's a podcast by this woman named Debbie Millman, and she brings on different designers every week to kind of talk about why design is important to them. And they're not just product designers; they're artists, musicians, chefs, like poets, people from all over. But it gives you a really great perspective on, you know, how design is important in very different facets of life. And How I Built This is also great for learning, you know, how companies have started, and a lot of them are, you know, focused on design. So how design played a role in the foundation and inception of companies. So that's just a little bit of resources that I used. And then if you guys have more questions, or if you want to contact me, here is some of my contact information for people to reach out. But that was it. I'm happy to take questions if anyone has any questions, and happy to, you know, answer any emails or anything after. So yeah, I'll hand it back over.
Yeah, if we can do questions for a little bit, we have plenty of time. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Those resources look really helpful, actually. Can you send those? Is it possible for you to get those to me somehow so we can post them in the resources channel?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Let me see if I can get those to you.
If you're in the Discord, you can send it to me there. I don't know if that's easier for you, or if you want to.
I am not, but
You just paste it in the chat. That's fine.
yeah, let me do that.
Cool. Cool. Thank you. So I guess if there's no questions, yeah, thank you so much for.
Actually, can I ask a question before we end?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I don't know if you have any experience with this, or if you do, can you talk about it? But have you ever used like personas when building any designs?
I haven't. I would be curious to know what that tool is, because I haven't used it. We typically work mostly in Figma, which is kind of like Google Docs for design, is how I describe it, like collaborative design. But you can really use whatever. I'm actually quite curious to know, is this like a also kind of like Sketch, or what is it?
No, personas are like a empathy tool where they're like a persona would be like a user profile of a made up individual.
That's cool. That's really cool. I haven't, but I will definitely check it out. When we usually do personas, we kind of make them, we make them from scratch. But I would, thanks for the tip, actually.
I also have a question. So I think you mentioned about like how there are a lot of different people you should or you have to consider when designing for something. And I was wondering like how can you keep track of all these different types of people, especially because there are so many and like a lot of different, they all have like different kinds of needs. So like how would you keep track?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a couple of ways to do it. What I've typically done is kind of bucket needs into the kind of middle case scenario, which maybe like 80% of the people fall into, and then think about different edge cases that might exist. And this again is like, take it with a grain of salt, because the larger your base is, the edge cases kind of become more common or more normal. So they're not really considered edge cases anymore, but kind of thinking about people that are a little bit, are not our central core users, and are kind of, we have to design for them a little bit differently. So kind of bucketing it in that way, where you have your general user base that's like maybe 75-80% of the population, and then understanding, okay, the last 20%, how many different segments are there, and keeping track of that can kind of be done in multiple ways. The way that I really like to do it is kind of designing out the scenarios for those different edge cases or those different use cases, and seeing how we can put those together. I would encourage you to find patterns between people and see how you can kind of combine a bunch of different cases and see if there's ways that you can put them together. So if you kind of see a pattern in usage amongst, like, you know, a couple of different groups or types of people, designing for that one general pattern versus designing for each individual user, you'll find that a lot of people, when you start asking people about problems, like themes will come out, and designing for those themes versus designing for like you specifically versus someone else makes the task a little bit easier, or a little bit less kind of, you know, of a daunting problem to solve. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Of course. If you guys have questions later, you can always send me an email or whatnot, but happy to answer any.
All right. Well, if that's all the questions for now, I think go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much for speaking and doing this presentation. It was really interesting.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and our next set of talks are happening at 3, and that's speculative design and critical making with Augustus, and then design thinking with Caitlin and Marissa. So hopefully we see you guys there. And again, thank you so much, Shreya.
You're welcome. Talk soon.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. You're welcome.